There is a question most people never ask. Who is thinking inside my mind? Because if you sit still for long enough, something uncomfortable begins to reveal itself. The fears you carry, the anger you repeat, the urgency you feel, the exhaustion you cannot explain. How much of it is truly yours, and how much of it quietly entered through repetition? Because modern influence no longer arrives loudly. It enters quietly, a headline, a notification, a recommendation, a scroll that lasts longer than intended, a moment of boredom. Filled instantly, and little by little, your attention begins to fragment. Your thinking becomes interrupted. Your emotions become easier to trigger. Your focus becomes harder to hold. Until eventually, silence itself begins to feel uncomfortable. And maybe that should concern us, because modern society fights for one thing above everything else: your mind. Not your money, not your time, but your perception, your attention, your emotional energy. Because whoever influences the mind eventually influences reality, and most people never realize they are being influenced at all. The strange thing about manipulation is that the best kind never feels like manipulation. It feels normal, natural, effortless. Nobody forces you to scroll. Nobody forces you to click. Nobody forces you to stay. And yet, hours disappear. Attention disappears. Peace disappears. The modern world does not ask for your focus. It captures it, quietly, deliberately, because attention has become the most valuable resource on Earth. Every platform competes for it. Every advertisement, every outrage cycle, every algorithm, every notification competing for a small piece of your awareness. And awareness matters because what repeatedly enters the mind eventually shapes the mind. Thoughts are not random. Beliefs are not accidents. What you consume repeatedly becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes believable. And what becomes believable begins shaping how you see reality. This is why emotional content spreads faster than thoughtful content, why outrage spreads faster than wisdom, why fear keeps attention longer than peace, because emotion keeps people watching. Calm people pause, reflective people question, focused people notice, but emotionally overwhelmed people, they react. And reaction is easier to predict, easier to guide, easier to influence. The frightening part is, most people believe they are consuming information without noticing. Information is slowly consuming them, not dramatically, quietly, over years, until distraction begins feeling normal and clarity becomes rare. People protect many things carefully: their homes, their money, their passwords, their health. But very few people ask, what is entering my mind every day? Imagine eating anything placed in front of you without questioning quality, without questioning consequence. It would sound absurd, yet this is exactly how many people treat information. Everything enters, fear enters, negativity enters, noise enters, endless opinions enter, and every piece leaves something behind. Because the mind remembers more than we think. Every image affects perception. Every repeated message shapes emotion. Every environment changes thinking, even when we do not notice. Especially when we do not notice. Mental exhaustion rarely comes from one large event. It comes from accumulation. Too much noise, too much stimulation, too much urgency, too much emotional pressure. And slowly, the mind becomes overcrowded, not with understanding, but with noise. Perhaps this explains something strange about modern life. People know more information than ever before, yet seem increasingly confused, because information alone does not create clarity. Silence does, reflection does, thoughtfulness does, but modern life leaves little room for any of them. There was once something ordinary that now feels uncomfortable. Silence. Waiting without stimulation, walking without distraction, sitting alone with thought. But the moment silence appears, many people rush to escape it. Music, scrolling, videos, notifications, anything to avoid being alone with thought. But why? Because silence confronts us. Silence asks difficult questions. Are you truly happy? What are you running from? What have you ignored? Who are you becoming? And many people fear these questions. So stimulation becomes escape. A life so filled with noise that self-reflection never has room to breathe. But there is a cost, because when you never spend time with your own thoughts, you slowly lose your relationship with yourself. Opinions become borrowed. Desires become borrowed. Fears become borrowed. Even identity begins feeling borrowed. You begin reacting instead of reflecting, absorbing instead of questioning, performing instead of thinking. And maybe this is the quiet tragedy of modern life. Not that people are distracted, but that many no longer know themselves beneath the noise. So what does protection look like? Not paranoia, not isolation, not abandoning technology, something quieter. Awareness, intentionality, mental discipline. The understanding that not everything deserves access to your attention. Not every opinion deserves emotion. Not every outrage deserves energy. Not every distraction deserves your focus. Because attention is finite, and what receives attention begins shaping identity. Protecting your mind begins with boundaries, choosing what enters, choosing what stays, choosing when silence is necessary. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause, think, observe, before reacting, because clarity requires space, and space has become rare. The people who learn to protect their attention eventually protect something deeper, their peace, their thinking, their independence, their ability to see clearly. Because in a world designed to fragment focus, clarity becomes power, not loud power, quiet power. The power of awareness, the power of choosing carefully, the power of remaining present. When everything around you is fighting for distraction, your mind is where reality is built, the place where your future quietly begins. And every day, something asks for access to it. A screen, a voice, a fear, an outrage, a distraction. Some things deserve entry. Many things do not. Because once attention is captured, thought slowly follows, then behavior, then identity, and eventually an entire life shaped unconsciously. The modern world profits from distracted people. So perhaps the question is no longer, what are you paying attention to? But what is shaping the person you're becoming? Protect your mind, because once the mind is lost, everything else quietly follows.